Alright. So, before I get into this, I'm gonna just preface that, you can respond as negatively to this video as you want. I don't give a damn about that. I just don't care. Like, I'm just not gonna take it on. It's whatever, honestly. And that's it. That's all I gotta say. Now, moving on to the main topic. Alright, so She-Hulk. I just finished watching the first 3 episodes. Because I think the recent episode just dropped or something like that. I don't know. I hadn't watched any of the other episodes prior to today. I just felt like I was seeing people like react to it, and I was like, you know what? I'm curious. Because I actually do like the character, generally speaking, from the little I've seen things like video games and like screen grabs of comics and things. I've just, I've always liked the aesthetic of the character. In any case, that's not really what I need to talk about. What I need to talk about is mostly just the really negative response that this show is getting that I do not understand. Like, to put into perspective my mentality going into this, I already knew a lot of people were having problems with the show. And all I was seeing is people complaining about it and like talking smack. That's mostly negativity about it. I didn't really take it on or anything because people have a tendency to form those kinds of opinions and stick by them regardless of whether or not like anything in the show it's good or bad. Like, I didn't know. It was kind of turning me off for a while, but then I'm also like, after a while, like, is there validity to any of that? So I'm also very well aware of the politics surrounding Disney and also like Disney haters and like the Marvel MCU and all of that. The discussion around it recently with a lot of their recent shows and how people responded to some of those shows and how people think that like the phase 4 of the MCU is like the worst phase and everything's going downhill. All of that stuff. I've heard of it. I've been plugged in. I know the narrative. So I knew all that going into this show. And I also knew all the claims that people were making about the show being like really, really bad, or like woke, trying to push a narrative, or like being like impossible to watch, that kind of shit. Like, I seen a bunch of videos popping up on my timeline about that. Of course, people talking about it in like hashtags and stuff. I didn't really take on any of it, but I was aware of it. And going into this show, I go into it with the same kind of energy I go into pretty much everything I watch now. Is just like a little bit of skepticism, low expectations, but like also perfectly willing to be to enjoy it. And like, I just did not see anything that made me upset at all. Like, I could see why other people might get upset, but I also personally just had a good time and enjoyed what I watched. Yeah, and that's my perspective on the show, I guess. That was just it. But then, of course, curiosity, being what it is, led me to just like look at how people have been responding to the episodes. Like, obviously, I knew there'd be a lot of negative response, but I was like trying to see if there was anything like defending the show or people watching it and like enjoying it. And I did find some reactions, and like a lot of people who were reacting to the show were enjoying it. Like, they didn't really have much of a problem with it, which is good to know. Good to know. But then, of course, I found a lot of like really, really like incendiary negative responses to it, like trying to really be like, this show is the worst of the worst, the pit of despair. It's garbage. Absolutely nothing of value there. And I feel like it's just such an overreaction, and it's also very typical of this kind of like point in the MCU history. And mind you, I don't care that negativity exists. I'm fine with it. It's whatever. People, at the very base level of things, when somebody watches something, when they're watching it, somewhere inside they're feeling something, and then that feeling is what their experience, their opinion of that thing is going to be. Like, if that feeling feels negative, or angry or anything, if that's the feeling that it causes you to feel, then that's entirely valid. Like, that's just you. Like, I can't change that about you, and I'm not even here to change that. I will, like I said at the beginning, I really don't care that people have a negative opinion about that, or even have problems with Marvel, or whatever. My point is that I care when people take that kind of a approach and then also try to force it on other people or call out people for having a difference of opinion. Because, like I said, if you watch a show and the feelings that you get inside are not negative, you can't force them to be negative. And, like, as much as anybody might want to claim about how you feel, there's nothing changing that puerile feeling. The same thing goes again for people who hate this show. I can't make you think that the show is great. That's not at all possible. It's not going to happen. But at the same time, you can't also go. It's not right for somebody to go over to somebody else's, like, positive review, like in the case of somebody I'm going to bring up, Angry Joe, and then outright call them frauds or like fraudulent or just like sellouts because they enjoyed something and you didn't. Like, it's actually crazy to me that Angry Joe, of all people, is being called a sellout for not disliking the show. He gave it a 7 out of 10. That's not even a good review. That's an average review. That's like sight. And they called him a sellout for saying that he had a positive opinion, even if it's not even that great. Like, it's not a 10 out of 10. It's not even close to that. He said it was a 7. And because he didn't say it was a 0. Like, his comments are full of people like calling him sellouts or saying that like his entire viewpoints are invalid because it's this, that, or because it's not like what they expected. Like, does that make any sense to you? Like, a big thing that I find present, especially with people who like have a problem with so-called wokeism or cancel culture or like pandering and things like that, is that ironically, despite the fact that they seem to have a problem with like other people forcing their opinions or beliefs into things, they themselves are just as likely to cancel somebody for having a difference of opinion, as shown. Not everybody, of course, but like a lot of people. There was actually a moment in the episode where they were showing like negative tweets to the fact that like She-Hulk exists, and like that part made me burst out in laughing because I've seen comments exactly like that, and I don't think this was a reactionary thing either. This show was probably recorded and edited long before the episodes are being put up. I think that was predictive, because simply put, the shit that's been going on around these shows as they've been coming out, especially ones that have female leads, have been going on for months and months and months. It's been happening for like since Phase 4 even started. And so, like, the writing's on the wall, man. Like, it's such an expected thing that is, like, coming up, that it's just, like, it's just such an expected response that nobody really even, how do I put this? It's just, I'm losing my train of thought. I might have to actually edit this video. Oh, no. It's such an expected thing, like, that even the showrunners know it's gonna happen, because it happens all the time, and it's this perpetual cycle. Like, it's such a thing to push that narrative. Like, like, people who are negative in these situations, like I brought up, are likely to also cancel because they also make their opinions political. Like, it's a thing to have an opinion and then make it into some sort of argument about like the ethics of the people writing these shows, or like the producers trying to pander to certain people, and vice versa. Like, the opposite side of that is like it's also a political thing to argue that like a show ain't shit because it doesn't have this kind of representation, or because or like that this kind of representation should always be present. You know, like there's people who stand these shows hardcore and just like entirely mind. Like, they're just positivity machines. Like they can't say a bad thing about them to save their lives. And then there's people who only say negative things and just like it's a mindset. It comes down ultimately, I think, to ego, because it's not a matter of like is it good or bad, because like we all have our opinions. At the end of the day, like I said, you can't force somebody to change them. It's a matter of is my opinion the objectively right opinion, and can I push that narrative as being right? How do I validate what I felt objectively so that it's just a fact and that everybody believes me and like I'm validated, right? It's about the validation of people agreeing with you, which again is exactly the kind of thing that cancel culture strives on. And it really just comes down to like the tribalism, the tribalism of having an opinion or having being around like-minded people. When people are like have certain things that they believe and they really really want that thing to be the truth, they huddle together with other people who will validate and uplift that opinion. I'm not saying this specifically about people who are negative. This exists in all kinds of people. My point here is that like it becomes such a obsession to bash these kinds of shows, and it makes me always question. And like you always hear this, right? The people are being like, I'm done with the MCU after this, I'm just not going to watch any more movies. And you know what, I actually admire those people, because they're smart if they actually follow through with what they do. You know, like if you're gonna be negative about the MCU and say that it's always bad and then say that it's always political, please, by all means, like get it off your chest and then actually move on. Because if you keep going down this road, you're just gonna repeat the same arguments again and again and again, and that is what's happening. It's just a repeating of the same narrative of, oh, the show is woke because it has a female lead, or oh, they're trying to downplay their male leads and all that stuff. Like even, you know what the weird, ironic thing about all of this is? Maybe ironic's not the right word. I don't use that word always perfectly. But the weird thing about this is that like a lot of the complaints, especially in the first episode, is like this idea that like they're trying to show She-Hulk as better than the original Hulk, which I don't even think I ever got the impression, and upon thinking back on it, I feel like that's actually not correct. It's a conflict of egos. You know? Like, something that I find in myself sometimes, and also like a lot of people in general, but also mainly men, is that like sometimes you just feel this like sense of I need to prove myself bigger and better than the next guy, even when like in my case, even when like you have no business comparing yourself to the next guy, right? And in this case, I'm talking about opinions, not necessarily the show, but that we'll get back to that. Like, I could be in a room with somebody who works out all the damn time, but I will still try to prove that I'm faster in a race than him, even if like there's no way I'd win that race. You know, and I've seen, especially recently in myself, me making a habit out of that, like, and it getting really elevated over time to the point where like I'm damn near close to fighting this nigga for no reason. Like, why? Why am I getting so heated up about something that is actually insignificant? Like, there's no need to compare things like power levels between like characters like Goku and Superman, for example. It's something that is definitely a thing that we have an impulse to do, and I understand why people would want to do it, because again, you want to stand up for the things that you like, right? You're passionate about these sorts of things. It's exactly also why people don't necessarily leave the MCU despite having like misgivings, because they've already invested so much time into it. They are attached to it, so when they see it being something that they don't want it to be, they feel an attachment to the past thing. It happens with all kinds of things, like people who have like certain eras of Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network where they're just like, oh, cartoons stopped being good after this cartoon when they stopped watching it, right? Because it's an ego thing. It's partially an ego thing and partially just their experience. Like, it no longer became relevant to them. They're no longer interested in it So therefore, everything from there is bad. In this case, a lot of people are less interested in the stuff that's post Endgame, maybe because they find it to be bad or uninteresting or low quality or whatever reasons you might have to not like it. But instead of just being like, well, I'm done with this, let me move on, it's too much of a thing. You can't just let go of it. And yeah, to compare, when you compare yourself when you're comparing things to other things, or you have like a attachment to certain things, you want that thing to be better. Again, with like the Goku Superman thing, or like really any like power level comparisons or character comparisons, like it gets kind of incendiary to the point where it's like, we just need to fight about this thing, right? And like it's also like, because these fights just keep going on and on, it becomes just a case of just repeating the same arguments over and over and over again an infinitum, because like we always want to be better even if we've already made all the points that we possibly could. And in the reality, like, there's more nuance to everything. Like, what's the point of comparing the strength level of Goku and Superman? The reality of the matter is that, like, I don't even think those characters would care that much about the strength difference. I mean, Goku would, right? He would try to fight Superman, but even if he didn't beat him, he would just be like they'd never go to the point where they destroy the world or kill each other. Like, they'd just be cool with each other, right? That's the reality of these things. But then things like Death Battle exist, where people, like, where we have to put these two against each other to the death, which is not a bad thing. You know, it's a thing that exists, but it's just not. It's not that important in reality. Like, in the case of like me arguing with other people and getting like really heated about it. Like, I think back on myself, I'm just like, why was I arguing about this? Why was I getting heated? Why was I allowing myself to feel such negativity towards somebody I care about? And the reason I'm bringing all of this up is that this happens in the first episode of She-Hulk. Because, like, yeah, people make the argument that She-Hulk is saying that she's better than him, but I feel like I feel like the show is not trying to show that she's objectively better than Bruce, because she's not. Like, when you look at the fight that they have, it's not even a serious fight, and Bruce is obviously taking it easy on her. Like, that's not a factor, really. It's saying it's a matter of her ego and his ego clashing in a way that would naturally happen between family members, especially in a similar situation. And also just a matter of their own perspectives clashing, right? Because, like, she doesn't want to be a superhero, and she feels like she shouldn't be forced into this situation. And also, like, she's got enough control over her life and dealing with anger, and because she's in her own unique, like, she is herself. She's in her own unique situation. And Bruce is himself. Like, they're different people with different struggles in life. So, Bruce trying to put that kind of struggle onto her isn't necessarily applicable. Like, it's not a hard statement, because as a matter of fact, Bruce is right about the fact that she needs to be responsible and that she will inevitably become a superhero. Like, it's just something that you don't choose for life. It will happen. He's right about that. And she even ends up echoing those sentiments in her speech at the beginning, right? And then ultimately ends up in that situation at the end. So while she is correct that she has, like, control over herself and her situation isn't the same as Bruce's, and that she can go out back into the world and pursue her career if that's what she wants to do, she's also wrong in that, like, she can just ignore being the Hulk, you know? Like, they're both right. And they don't even, that fight doesn't even end with one of them winning. Like, the point of the matter is that, like, it's way more gray than that. Their power levels don't fucking matter at all. This isn't even a show about power levels. And I don't think that Marvel, or at least the writers of this show, are trying to argue that she's objectively better than Bruce or anything like that. Like, but it becomes about that because some people, I guess I'll put myself in that bubble too. We have an attachment to Bruce because we've had him around for so long. And if you're a dude, you have an attachment to the fact that, like, you know, I'm a dude, that's my hero, that's a hero that I look up to, I think is cool. So, like, I want him to be the strongest, right? Because being strong is an important thing for us, you know. But then, like, hey, they made a bootleg version of this character who's female and is stronger, so, like, oh my god, I guess the women just trying to take our place again. it becomes like this again, this ego thing. Our ego, our attachment to like male characters being awesome is being challenged by the idea that there's, or being attacked even, is a by the idea of like this other character just comes out of nowhere and they're suddenly better. Like that Mary Sue, that Mary Sue argument that always comes up. Like, as a character of Mary Sue, that was such a huge thing for such a long time. I watched a whole documentary about it. Actually, that's how much of a thing it was. Like this argument that like things aren't always like a character can be objectively just there to be self-insert or for pandering or anything like that, despite this character existing for a while. Which again, I don't necessarily think is the case here. Like, really, I think the argument is there that it doesn't even matter, and it also doesn't really matter to a lot of people who watch this, especially if they're just trying to enjoy the show. It shouldn't matter who's better than each other, and yet it is such a narrative that like the show is trying to prove that, and that like it's pandering and it's toxic and that it's just objectively bad because of that, and also because it's about a woman and about woke topics like women are in danger when they go outside and are usually stressed out, which, mind you, is actually true. Like, I don't want to be the sponsor, the spokesperson for guys who have women friends everywhere and also women, but like, come on, man, you're telling me you don't have a friend who's expressed like fear about being out alone, who's a girl who like expressed fear about being out alone or being stressed or having things like certain situations or circumstances that are exclusive to her or exclusive to women that they have to deal with all the time. And like, none of this stuff is like all that much of a wild topic. The very fact that it is being brought up at all, it should not be a surprise, because while it's just one, it's just a fact of life, and two, it's also just such a common thing. Like, and that's fine to be expressed. Like, it's really not a big deal. And if you feel that way, okay, fine. Again, like I said, I'm really not here to convince you. It's just I'm just trying to point to like the idea of using your ego to validate your opinions as objectivity. And that's what I also think about like a lot of these videos, like analysis and response saying like this is a bad show. I think the reason why they're viewing it that way is because they're analyzing it from the perspective of the MCU as a whole before this, or the political aspect, which I've already talked about. Like, if you're trying to analyze this as a superhero film or TV show based on the what everything that's come before it, and like things like Bruce Campbell's mono myth and all of that stuff, then yeah, probably you might come to the perspective that it's not that great, or it doesn't fit into the box that you're trying to put it into. But at the same time, as somebody who isn't really caring about all of that and just trying to have a good time, you could definitely enjoy this. And I think just in general, like, there's a real sense that you need to always break down something and put it into the good bad box when you're analyzing things on YouTube. Like, especially since negativity gives you so much good shit on this platform. I'm gonna get so many views potentially if people hate this video. Oh, it'd be great. But it's true. If you have a contentious, controversial opinion, or at least something that sounds like it's contentious and controversial because it's negative, then you're more likely to get boosted on this platform. A defense video, or even a video talking about like how great something is not going to get the same kind of attention as, well, it doesn't always get the same amount of attention or buzz naturally as something that isn't contentious, you know, something that's just nice. That's how news has always worked. It's not even a matter of just like cancel culture or like the internet or the algorithm. That's just how news has worked for years. It's just like, people don't give a shit that Molly got a new cat. They care that Molly's cat got ran over by a car 5 minutes later. That's what they care about. That's like, oh my god, the cat died, and the person who ran over it is filing a lawsuit, and blah blah blah. Like, all this bullshit is happening. You're like, whoa! That's the reason why. But yeah, no, I just I think at the present, like it's just in this state of being where this show and also the MCU are just getting constant negative feedback because that's what's in to do, or that's what people who don't like the direction they're taking really want to push as the narrative. Because if that's the case, they're validated. Like, my opinion is now the valid, accepted fact, and I can feel comfortable knowing that I am right. It's an ego thing. That's my overall consensus, is that it's an ego thing. And again, I don't care that you don't like the show. Do it. In fact, good for you, actually. I endorse that you don't like this show. Just, you know, be cool about it. Stop trying to make a narrative or just throw other people under the bus. If you're doing this, don't try to throw people under the bus because they disagree with you. You know, that shouldn't be the case, because that is, in my eyes, just as much cancel culture, just as much intolerance as people who say that you have to like something because it has this, that, and the other, or that you have to hate somebody because they did this, that, and the other. Like, you know, just be cool. That's the reason why I've been on the soapbox this whole time, even though I'm actually sitting. Why I've been on the soapbox complaining all this time, ranting, not even complaining. I've just been ranting, getting my thoughts off my mind. I just want people to be more cool about things, and I also really want to encourage anybody who did enjoy this to just make a video talking about the things you enjoyed, or like how funny you find the thing. Just, like, I need some balance in this world. I need some balance, brother. Like Thanos. Anyways, I think I've talked enough, honestly, and got my feelings out there. And I really did need to make this video. So actually, this video isn't for anybody. It's for me, because I was just rambling to myself in the shower about, like, my thoughts on the whole situation. So I wanted to get them onto something. And now it is onto YouTube. It's onto YouTube. Not really. You don't even have to think about this if you don't want to. Anyways, namaste. What's up? Ciao. I'll see you in the next video if you want to watch again. Yeah. See ya.